We've also heard that the part of the NSIA's role is to sort of play a convening role within the national security community. So it's a significant role. And there have been suggestions made, for instance, in the NCERA report, that the role should be formalized in a legal instrument. We've also heard talk in these commission's proceedings from the clerk, I believe, who suggested the idea of a mandate letter, perhaps. What are your thoughts on that?
Over the course of the years that I've been Prime Minister, we've had a number of different changes to the National Security Advisor role. One of the changes I made reasonably early on was actually adding National Security and Intelligence Advisor, because it wasn't just about security. Intelligence was becoming more and more important in our approach. But from one NSIA to the next, there were significant changes in the threat environment around us, in the composition of the senior ranks of the public service and the different roles. When Ian Shugart was my clerk, he came at that role with such a deep and expert understanding of international issues, of intelligence issues, that he played a role not just as a clerk, but as a significant national intelligence and security advisor to me, just as through his capabilities and personality, and therefore the actual NSIA I had at that point had a slightly different role than in other times where the clerk wasn't as much of a national security focused individual and had other qualities, and the National Security Advisor was really the person who was centered around that for me. So those natural variations, and for example, the fact that right now my National Security and Intelligence Advisor is also Deputy Clerk of the Privy Council, which I think is very useful in this case, isn't necessarily automatically something every future Prime Minister would want. Therefore, the idea of bounding in very prescriptive legislation, the role of a National Security and Intelligence Advisor, I think would be probably less flexible than the role actually requires, because the most important part of the role is that the individual be empowered and connected to the Prime Minister in the right way, but also able to command the town or the intelligence agency's respect and be able to convene. So some of the things we've done to strengthen and almost codify that role are around the creation of the National Security Council. Which is more of a strategic convening of ministers and top officials to look forward around larger issues, as opposed to an IRG, incident response group, which is to respond to a specific incident. This is a more strategic look, and the role of the National Security and Intelligence Advisor is to be the secretary to that Council, the same way the clerk of the Privy Council is also secretary to cabinet. It's a role that gives them an official lever in convening and controlling the work done at that particular table, whether it be a cabinet for the clerk or the NSC for the NSIA. So that has already strengthened and codified to a certain extent the role of the NSIA. But we have found that publishing mandate letters that delineate clearly my expectations of what, in most cases, ministers, which is what they're directed at, are expected to do and what authorities they have and how they're expected to function, has been incredibly useful, a tool that is very bespoke for the moment you're in and the kind of organization that your government has particularly set up. Publishing the mandate letters means that the public knows clearly what is expected of these individuals. Journalists and academics can dig into, whether a particular official or minister is fulfilling their role as expected and how they're doing on that. But the most important use of the mandate letters we've actually found is internal to government themselves. We find that public servants in various departments regularly consult the mandate letters that we have published so that they know exactly what the minister is responsible for, what they're actually trying to do. And a mandate letter for the National Security and Intelligence Advisor would seem to me to be an excellent use of both empowering and clarifying the expectations of a given government at a given moment in a public way, but also an accountable way.
So that would be a way to maybe give some structure without compromising on flexibility?
I wouldn't say that, because it's not the mandate letter that gives the structure. The way we set up the office, the way we task and empower, various parts of government is inherent. The mandate letter would would reveal that structure and give direction on the outcomes that we want to have. And I think that's where it could be useful.
Okay. I'm going to come back to the National Security Council because it's something I want to discuss in more depth. But before that, and before leaving the topic of information flow more generally, there's a couple of intelligence products that have come up repeatedly in the Commission's proceedings that I want to ask you about. One is called the targeting paper. And so this one is, just to introduce it briefly, a document that was drafted by CSIS in 2021 about the PRC's essentially targeting of Canadian political actors for influence operations. And it wasn't published in 2021. It was published in 2023 and circulated to a small number of public servants. There was a second, more sanitized version with, for instance, names removed, produced of it. And the intention was that would be circulated more widely. And we've heard from the CSIS director, Mr. Vigneault, former director, that in his view, that should have been provided to you. So last time we broached this topic, Prime Minister was in camera, and at that time you'd never seen the targeting paper at all, and I understand that you now have? Okay.
Yes.
Having seen it now, do you have any views on whether it's something that should have come to your attention in 2023?
Well, one of the reflections I have on how this sort of piece of analysis has caused so much reflection around this commission and various chatter is the phrase targeting paper by China is fairly alarming. What the targeting paper actually talks about is that China has broadly classified into three different groups parliamentarians in their diplomatic activities, some as being positive towards China and perhaps there to engage in constructive ways, others who are neutral or convincible to be more positive towards China, to show up at various events, and others who have demonstrated themselves to be more antagonistic to the Communist Party of China's government by speaking out strongly on the Uyghur issue or on human rights in Hong Kong or on various other of the issues that China doesn't like people to discuss publicly and criticize them on. The fact that Chinese diplomats are categorizing MPs in their outreach abilities into those three categories is not itself particularly revelatory to me or new information to me. It is fairly obvious, and it is part of what what diplomats do in every country around the world. I mean, when we are busy fighting to defend or renegotiate NAFTA with the United States under the Trump administration a few years ago, we had very clear lists of, okay, this Republican governor could be very helpful to us. This one is going to be a challenge, so let's stay away from them or try and come at them or try to neutralize their influence on others. That's just part of diplomacy right there. I will say that having read the targeting paper in detail now, there were some interesting factoids or tidbits in there that I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. None of them significantly altered at all my perception of China's behavior, China's focus, China's engagement, influence, and in some cases interference in Canada to any significant degree. And I count on my national security and intelligence advisor to look at various products to make a determination whether or not they are ready to go to the Prime Minister. I think in both of these cases, the papers were at the other special report that you're going to be talking about in a moment were not in a final form according to the NSIA, and therefore there wasn't a decision made to pass it along to me. I have to trust the NSIA's judgment, as I said before, in knowing what is going to be useful for me, what is going to be an appropriate use of the 10 or 15 minutes worth of time that would take to go over a document like this, whether it adds to my knowledge or whether there, in those 10 or 15 minutes that she has to submit other information to me, there is more germane or more relevant information that she thinks would be a better use of my time. The determination was made in the case of this targeting paper, or the targeting paper didn't get to me because of decisions made by the NSIA or not made by the NSIA in terms of not choosing to pass it along. And I have faith, having looked at the papers, that it was indeed the right decision by the National Security and Intelligence Advisor, that it wasn't a document that significantly added in a relevant way to my understanding of the situation.
Okay. Just for clarity of the record, the evidence we actually heard from the NSIA at the time, Jody Thomas, was that she never received the final version. So she never even made that decision that it wouldn't go up to you. But so you brought out a couple of interesting themes in that answer, and one of which, yes, you've been paying attention, because the next document I was going to ask you about is the PCO special report. So why don't I go there, and then I'll ask you some more general questions about the two of them. So the special report then was the product produced by IAS, the PCO Intelligence Assessment Secretariat, late 21, early 2022. And this was, for everyone's benefit, drafted in collaboration with CSIS and essentially an overview of PRC foreign interference activities in Canada. This, as you've said, is one that wasn't finalized and ultimately never reached you, and that you have now read. So in that time period where this was under discussion would be winter, spring 2022. And now, having read it again, and you may have given part of this answer already, but is that something you would have wanted to have at that time? And are there any problems ensuing from the fact that you did not receive it then?
Again, there were elements and facts and examples in there that I had not seen before. But the overview and the pulling together of information, while useful, I'm sure, for people who were coming at this without the kind of regular briefings that I got, could have been very useful. I don't feel that there was anything in there that I didn't already understand and know about how China was engaging across different fields in Canada. it wasn't particularly new. It was a very useful and good piece of work that combined and compiled everything. And for someone new to the job would have been extraordinarily important. Even not just new to the job of Prime Minister, new to a role in the office, or trying as an introductory level of okay, now you need to understand this. But it was a compendium of many themes that I have been grappling with over the past number of years in regards to China. And I, again, feel that the NSIA was justified in not feeling that it was imperative that they put it rapidly on my desk, particularly because, as you say, it wasn't yet in its final form.
Okay. We're actually going to move to I'll come back to some of the questions I was going to ask you in themes around that, but I'm going to move to a different topic for now, which